as they come in. I think it's fine. So it's good. So welcome everyone who is here, and a huge welcome to our guest today. Or we're all guests in Marjetica's studio in Ljubljana. It's really great to get out. I've explained to Marjetica that it is seems like the hottest day in the UK so far. It feels like maybe it's going to be the hottest day of the year already, which is a bit crazy. And I think I sort of mentioned that because I'm really interested in the work that Marjetica does and how it actually looks at ecosystems around us and looks at not only the structural and political aspects of our environments, but very much about how things directly improve our lives just through things like water and soil and gardening and being together with other people. And these are all very important current ideas. And I think for us at Eastside Projects, I think we invited Marjetica to come and make an exhibition with us to learn from the way that she has looked at the world and made case studies and brought together learnings from lots of different cultures around the world. So I think that's sort of an important thing to mention. And also because you haven't shown enough in the UK, Marjetica. You should have had more projects. We want to see more in the UK. So it feels really good to be able to invite you and introduce you to everyone here. Yeah. But we're going to talk through. I mean, we're in the middle of developing an exhibition. This is a live project for us. It's not like we've made an exhibition and here's the talk. We're not doing that. We're actually still thinking through what will happen in Eastside Projects and how we will connect to other people within Birmingham. So, and we're exploring new things today. So Marjetica has been doing other research and reading and connections. And I suppose I just wanted to start a little bit with that, just talking through that process of how you make your projects, some examples in a way of how you research and find and make connections with people.
Mm-hmm. I like to make collaborations. So it seems that the Eastside project that we are developing now, it sounds like a perfect thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like collaborations. I like to collaborate with people.
Yeah, it looks like all of your projects only work when you have been able to learn from other people and make things with other people.
Yeah, because I think it's super important to keep space for change. So I don't like quick exhibitions. I like really exhibitions that develop, where the project or an exhibition comes together from various angles. I do, like I was just, before we talked a little bit, and I was looking through Jona Friedman's books, and he has a quote which I love. He says, let me find the quote. The quote. Here's the quote. He says, "We continue the work of others." I love it because it's not so much, it's really the spirit of collaboration in this little statement. And when I was looking through his work and reading his notes, I realized how much I was also personally inspired by him. And today he's super relevant again, because the world has developed in his ways. It's not that he would build something, but I think he built very little. But his ideas reached millions of people, actually, also in India. Yeah. Because he produced the manuals that were widely shared, like the manuals, the cartoons. Maybe you can put out the image of the cartoons, like
I have got, let me find, I'm just going to share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's but this is also, sorry, I just jumped into Jona Friedman. That's a little sketch where he explains the concept of the la ville spatiale or spatial city in English.
Yeah.
And he was saying we have to move from suburbia, this is number one on the left side, and build homes in elevated structures, but in a way that people themselves would build within the skeleton structure. So he suggests that the future cities could be built on stilts above the existing situation, above actually existing cities and landscapes. And then only the skeleton structure would be built, and within the skeleton structures, people would build their own homes. That's a very contemporary idea because actually it shows a different kind of relationship between the government and residents. It's not that you wait that the government provides everything for you or nothing for you, as in informal cities, but it's some kind of a new, more realistic approach. Maybe you can go just also to the number 2 image, which is now the number 2 one before. This is the Belapur project in India. He was invited, Jonas Friedman was invited by the city of Bombay to make a proposal for a new city within the city of Bombay. And this is exactly the same idea as we saw before. So he proposes that the city builds three floors of like ongoing structures where the people themselves, residents themselves, can build homes.
Yeah, I think it's, what's interesting is straight away how you go into talking about another artist and architect's work and ideas, like really, really passionately, and so that you want to learn from all of those things that Jona made as well.
I still think he's such a contemporary thinker. Even you told me he passed away 2 or 3 months ago. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, we had chance. We were in touch with Jona at the end of last year, just talking about this project, because I thought I mean I'm a big fan of Jona's work, but as soon as you mentioned it and this idea of a common roof, a shared roof structure, I thought it was fantastic to be in touch. So we were in touch with him, and Jona was into being part of the project, and very sadly.
We actually hoped that it would develop into collaboration. Yeah, he was actually he was interested in it. So yeah, we came to this idea that the title of the project, this is working title, would be Under a Common Roof. And I guess this is also why I'm showing you Jonas Friedman's La Ville Spatiale, because it has the same idea. But also what actually I love with the project in development is that we decided to not to use the money for an installation inside Eastside projects, but actually to put the money towards people.
Yeah.
And maybe you can say something about it.
I think it's been a really nice turnaround because I suppose that's it. There's so much investment in building things that are temporary for exhibitions that just exist for a period of time, and if you're lucky and fortunate, maybe those structures get kept and go into a collection or somewhere else. But I think because we have quite a limited budget and how to approach it, and I really liked the fact that sort of turnaround happened across the lockdown, and thinking through the pandemic and about what would we do in the future? Do we want to suddenly spend a lot of money and make a big, impressive architectural feature in the gallery that is a case study to look at, or is it better to just support? Who should we support in the city? And I think that just comes from your work. You sort of instinctively wanted to change that and say, how can we? Yeah, if we build a common roof, maybe it's a metaphor of a roof, or it's a
idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that we're still working out
Oh,
how we do that now. You know, we're thinking the exhibition happens at the end of January next year, and we still don't really know how much freedom of movement there is across the city, across the UK, internationally. There's all these sort of questions, and about what sort of freedom that there should be, what it's ethical to be doing, how much travel it is to be doing. So, but it still feels we've shifted that into being about how can we be useful in Birmingham? Who could we support? What ideas and needs are there that this exhibition could accommodate and actually develop and invest in? You know, again on a small scale, but I think that's and that still feels very related to what Yona was trying to do. You know, these manuals, I think.
Yeah, on the screen we see just one of his manuals. This is manual which explains the spatial city. But I love his manuals because they are not recipes to do something. It's just an invitation to others to develop some kind of thinking, to improvise. He says that improvisation is like at the beginning of all intelligence and so on. So what I thought was also super interesting of Yona Friedman is that he talks that individual is the basis of the society. He never thinks about society as a group, but individual is a basis for society. But of course, individual, which is socially conscious individual, this is exactly the individual we are talking about these days. Also, you mentioned the coronavirus.
Yeah, and that, I mean, even within this grid here, this this small one page of a manual, that image on the right-hand side with the question mark that says, "I do not know how a Villa Spatiale will look." You know, that writing that into it. I was talking about that earlier with Ruth earlier on today. And yesterday I was in this talk with the British Council, and Sonia Boyce was in the talk, and we were talking about what's an idea to improve the cities in the future. And Sonia actually said at the end, said that I don't know. And I think sometimes it's good that you can say, I don't know. And the role of artists and architects is still to work with other people, to work to find out what it will be.
Yeah.
That feels like it's really integral to your work, because you're often picking up and learning and sharing other people's processes and thoughts and actions. I mean, I suppose in Yona's case, the fact that he didn't get to build this city, he didn't get to make it in the world, so it hasn't truly been tested out yet. It hasn't been tried. Do you feel like?
But it's being built now. You know, like I was sharing with you also this image, which I like an installation of mine, which I put up in 2001, that shows somehow the same idea, which is being built in South Africa. The piece is called Kagiza, the Skeleton House, and it was built in 2001 in the Guggenheim Museum, New York, because I got the Hugo Boss Prize at the time, which was very unusual for a conceptual artist, if I may say so. But what is interesting here is that on the left side, you see black and white photo. So I took a story from the New York Times where they explained that the city provides a roof and water and sewage system, and residents, they build their own houses under the roof. So actually it's completely similar narrative to Yona Friedman's. And I thought it was wonderful because I like the collaboration between the government and the residents. And actually I believe in new social agreements. And I think the exhibition itself also is about to formulate new social agreements, whatever they will be.
Yes.
Like you were talking about basic income, for instance, importance of basic income.
Yeah, I just think I mean, in a way, that's sort of the way that you can use a program of exhibitions and an approach to thinking about curating or an approach to being an artist, how do you build in what you think are the most important matters of the day? You know, and I think in a way, universal income is one of those, along with the idea of a common roof or shared, you know, access. You know, everyone having access to shelter. The idea of universal basic income is also an incredibly political criticism of the way that the economies are working at the moment. It has to be a criticism, and economies have to change. So that would be an interest.
Actually, I like to say, to tell to my students that we were living under a cloud of neoliberal, neoliberal social and economic agreement, roughly 40 years, like from 1968, from social revolution to 2008, which is collapse of the banks. And after that, the new window is open to revisit new ideas how to do things. And today, people, I'm reading books that are talking about, one book, I think it's called The Third Pillar, or something like this. It talks about importance to include community. So it's not only developers and government, but it's a triangle. It's a state, economy, and community. So the community becomes one of those integral parts of the discussion and development as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about it. I think it's like this is super important. But of course, people like Jonas Friedman in the 60s and 70s, he was developing similar ideas. But then it changed because of neoliberalism. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to say, isn't it? I mean, did he actually start Special in the 50s? Was it the early 60s? I mean, it's a long time.
I would say 60s.
Yeah, and I've come across it many times over, you know, my 25 years of looking at art and going around and seeing biennales and exhibitions and reading and being interested in architecture. But it still feels like it's blocked. Something stops it from reaching up and becoming a more, you know, usable content. You know, it's still very, very difficult. It's only operating in a situation out of where there's such a desperate need, or the idea of an ignored area, which is often where the informal city and the informal architecture is happening. It's like the outside of what is kept as that mainstream somehow within that neoliberal space.
Yeah,
it's still
yeah, Jonas Friedman also says that informal cities are realized utopias. And it's sort of a radical statement. And in a way, when my own experience when I worked in informal city in Caracas taught me that we live with a big baggage of prejudices. Like at the time, this was in 2001 or something, 2003, I guess. When I was invited by Caracas urban think tank to stay half a year in Caracas and to work in informal city. They had this idea to somehow figure out what is informal city. At the time, there was actually no discussion of informal cities in the architectural magazines, like we have them. They are now all over everywhere in architecture magazines. So what I learned, but not immediately, I learned it after some time, that of course informal city is not a chaotic structure, it is highly regulated structure. And we learned that, for instance, this is like a beautiful image of Caracas informal city. It's like a sea, you know, flowing down the mountain. And we have learned that they have strict regulations, but they are oral regulations, and we are accustomed to written regulations. So they didn't, we were not familiar with public space there, but with the community space. And there were a lot of, because actually the city is self-built, informal city is self-built, they have to deal with infrastructure later.
Yeah.
This is difference with a planned city, where you plan infrastructure first and then you build the city. So what I was working with my colleague Liat Esako, we were working on a dry toilet in former city of Caracas that doesn't need any water to operate. So this was my project there. But I really met prejudices that people associated with informal city, of course, also in Caracas itself.
And what was because I'm really interested in that dry toilet scenario that you've used in your work. Is that something that is being used in the informal city in Caracas?
Well, I'm not actually following up after my projects. I think Liat was there a couple of years ago. It is, of course, the project that we constructed together with the community is still working, and there are a couple of dry toilets also built with the same sort of know-how in formal city in the center of Caracas, as sort of a teaching tool where you can actually see how you can conserve water. Caracas itself is a very difficult case regarding the lack of water. It's a typical city completely stressed. The lack of water goes for everyone in the city, in the formal and informal city. We together with the community, we built the project, and it's still there.
There was a quote or something in one part of the writings about the project where you'd said how humans were the only species that purposefully soil our useful water just for this, for a purpose when there are other ways of achieving it, other ways of going to the toilet, other ways of recycling and composting and using waste products. And I just felt like that.
When you start to work on this sewage, when you start to think about how sewage system work, it's really crazy how we use a flushing toilet, because it actually drinks our drinking water. It's super crazy. So of course there are other ways to do it, and dry toilet makes sense in this case in informal cities for sure.
Yeah,
because
I just think
also a byproduct is fertilizer.
Yeah, which is amazing. Is it, what
we use for urban agriculture, which again was first formulated by Jona Friedman, if I understand correctly.
I mean, we've had some conversations that have, some doubt about how would we be able to do that in the gallery? Would people go to the toilet in the gallery? How long does it take to compost it? Looking at all those things. I think it's an interesting idea to look at, because it begins to unravel the things that we take for granted. That's what it is. That's the way it works. And there are lots of impacts of that. So I just see it as still a very powerful idea. Like, if you make a new big building in the city, what does it take for granted, and what else could it do? I think it's an interesting bit.
By the way, now that you're talking what we take for granted, when I was working in London with US architects, we implemented a big public art project of soil and water. The King's Cross Pond Club, here's the image. And the success of the project actually came through the first idea of our visit, when we visited the site, which was like really crazy, the biggest construction site you can imagine in the center of London. and there were just like cranes and mud and water everywhere. And we said, well, the project should really not take the value of the land as a real estate. The value of the land should be value of soil and water, two natural resources that we live with every day, but we take for granted. So this was the main idea, and the project was there 2 years, and during summer, during winter, and it was used by people from all walks of life, from railway workers to even, you know, the community around. There were community days organized. It was very, very well received by the community. And they also understood, this was like the biggest thing, the nicest thing that can happen to someone who loves to work on collaborations. But we started to work on the project without a community. Actually, the biggest, nicest thing that happened to us was actually the project created the community. And when it was conceived as a temporary project, so when it came to its end, people gathered around and signed the petition. More than 5,000 people signed the petition to keep the pond. And again, what was super interesting, they wanted to take the organization and maintenance on their own shoulders. And this is what I believe is the future of new public space. To have these kinds of project spaces that are like laboratories of inventing or to thinking about how we want to live together, our relationship with the city, citizens, nature, and so on. So yeah, it was really a tough project, but with a very good outcome.
That's what you mean by the community agreement or social agreement as well.
Yeah. They made a community agreement among themselves, residents. We were not involved in it, but I'm super proud of it. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, it looks amazing. I mean, I even in Birmingham, I've seen quite a few times people, you know, moaning about the lack of outdoor swimming spaces and pools within the city. You know, and it's I don't even know if there are any actually.
Yeah, well, the project, well, I forgot to mention, the value of the project was actually that the swimming pool was cleaned by water plants. So there are no chemicals no chemicals in the swimming pool. This is why we said this is living water. You are swimming in living water. But if you're swimming in chlorine water, it's like that water, do you know?
Yeah.
So things like this.
That's an amazing idea. I noticed when I'd looked, because I posted an image of this morning, and on a list of materials, and in it said animals as well. Did you introduce some insects or animal life into the work as well?
Yeah. I think it was really the project's title was Of Soil and Water, and of course water where you can swim in and is cleaned by plants. This was one statement. The other statement was the soil and the plants inhabiting the soil. We worked with a permaculture designer or farmer. Actually, she's a farmer with permaculture philosophy from Germany, and basically we wanted to work with landscape architects that were organized by commissioners, but it just became too crazy because they didn't understand the idea of development of the landscape. And so this is why we started to work with a permaculture farmer, and the landscape was completely in transition during the 2 years it developed. It had very different stages because also the soil just was sometimes poor soil, sometimes richer soil, and some plants, they took over other plants. So some plants actually vanished. and there were like millions of butterflies, and
Wow.
I don't know, like it was really beautiful. Actually, people who signed the petition, they asked the project to be replaced someplace because they said that the project became part of the green corridor that goes through the King's Cross neighborhood.
Okay. I've just because I've unshared the screen, I've noticed there's a few comments which I couldn't see while I was sharing the screen. And there's someone asking about
Sure.
when you speak of dry toilets, do you mean what most people call composting toilets? But that's what it is, isn't it? It's a composting toilet.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many different styles of dry toilet. But the basic thing is that you don't need any water to operate it.
Yeah.
And you reshuffle the material every half a year, and then this material becomes fertilizer. Yeah.
Yeah, and also and another point about it, when you were doing the dry toilet project in Caracas, you weren't describing it as a new thing, are you? You're describing it as a.
I always point out that it's not my design. Actually, we worked with some people who were building an NGO that was on a mission to build dry toilets in Mexico together with residents there. And we were in close contact with them. And we actually changed the design a little bit so it accommodated a more humid climate of Caracas.
Okay.
And what was for me very important is that the know-how was transmitted to local construction team that were able to build more dry toilets.
Yeah.
But
then
it also, yeah, sorry.
It comes from the place, doesn't it? Or it's obviously the way that we would have approached sewage in the past, and it just becomes an updated system that wipes it out and makes it appear that isn't even an option anymore in the mainstream. So I think that's again why I think it's such an interesting project, because it just sort of tackles a wrong potentially. I mean, I don't know how you would use it in a development. Like if we're part of a project.
I was professor of social design in Hamburg. I finished my job 2 years ago, and it's a big development in Hamburg where they have this new kind of water and sewage systems that are completely recyclable. And instead of flush toilets, you use toilets that somehow. It's the same toilet as on airplanes. I can't find now the word. So it uses like super minimum amount of water. Yeah. So this is all, and of course you also have the water is afterwards recycled. It doesn't go immediately into these super big sewage plants that make a big mess, and they use a lot of energy to again put the things that you put together apart, no? But basically, always the goal is to get drinking water also from the process.
Huh. And there's a couple of interesting
water. So actually, you as a person become a part of the water cycle. That's beautiful. Yeah.
Which is the same as what you're saying with the pool as well, with the swimming pool, that you become part of the living process.
Yes. Yeah.
Because a couple of people have mentioned that there were Lidos in Birmingham. There was one in Stetchford and there was one in Bourneville, which makes sense as well. That might have been part of they were also, Bourneville in particular was a part of a utopian attempt to create a village, which had all sorts of issues. But I think it had some good intentions at the heart of it. They've all gone. One of them's got housing has been built over the top of it.
Yeah.
But it still means that there's a lack in the city in some way. I mean, because that's one of the questions for us at the moment, isn't it? How we Someone says Stetchford wasn't utopian. That's Tom. So one of the questions for us is how we invite people to take part in the project, isn't it? And which causes and ideas to support. So I suppose we're yet to decide how to open that out and how to make sure it reaches people in the city who we might be able to be useful to.
We talked about the fact that evidently communication is the most important part of the project.
Yeah.
Not only the workshops, but also to, like, we thought actually to expand the structure of the exhibition or of the event into people. Like we talked about 3 figures: a host that would lead you into the exhibition space, and he or she would be a first person or the first respondent. So it's not that you as a visitor would come in the space and look at something, no? But it's actually you first start talking about issues. I think that's super important. And then also from my experiences with the workshop that I have done, I think it's super important to have good respondents. Like I call them a lawyer and a writer. But this just tells you that projects are not supposed to stay on a community level. They really, or these ideas, they really need to be implemented or to be understood on the level of the city.
Yeah.
And this, by the way, if we go back to Jonas Friedman, is the same way how he thought about the manuals.
Yeah.
Because manuals are not recipes for how to do something, but they are actually informing you about economy, putting questions about how you start to do things, how you, what you need to look at, and so on. It's just like it's this kind of open structure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that when we were talking before about us, that's where we want to spend the money that we have. We want to find people and a process of hiring people to be the exhibition in a sense, or to operate the exhibition, to man it, to host and to take people around. And also the other element for me is that, like, we have a project in the city centre to be part of designing the new market for Birmingham. And I think that these sort of opportunities, this is where exhibition and testing out ideas is a genuine learning that can feed directly into what that market can be, what that marketplace can be. So I think it's important to try and link up to communities around that market, who wants to see that change in what way. So I think that's the sort of thing that we're looking out for and we'll be trying to encourage. We don't know how that all comes together yet, apart from that it maybe is quite organic and map-like, and a set of bonds and links between people and shared ideas, I hope. I suppose that feels like enough of a goal. So I suppose, that's what I guess over the next 6 months we'll be working that out soon, that schedule. What sort of time scale have some of your other projects been when they are really directly involved in a community and its growth? How long?
It really depends. My work actually spans over, like, how to say, I have different scales, so to speak. Like the architectural case study of Kagiso Skeleton House, this is also a very important part of my work. And then another part which is important are the drawings or drawing manuals that are different from Jonas Friedman's, but of course there are also diagrams that explain some kind of situations of how we do things. But at the same time, I love to do on-site projects. And sorry, I lost the image.
I'm just putting some images on to see if any of them.
Yeah. So you still see me because I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
like
do you want me to go back to full screen?
Yeah, I don't have the screen. Aha, here I'm back now. So anyway, like public art projects are completely different from projects that I was working with students in Hamburg, because students, like we worked on long-term projects, like 2 or 3 months working on a location. One of the project was in Soweto in South Africa, and this is where we learned really a lot, myself included, of course. And the thing is that working with students is the best because they are very sort of, revolutionary, up to the point. They don't give up. They have a vision. That we artists, we tend to lose it when we work on how to say, on professional public art projects. Because already in advance that you are restricted as an author or co-author, so to speak. So this, I love to work with students.
Yeah. And are you? How much time do you spend? Because I know that you're back in Ljubljana now, and you lived in many years in Berlin. But were you ever living elsewhere as part of a project for a long period of time?
Sure, yeah. One of the projects that was very important for me was to stay a couple of months in Amazonia. This was, I don't know, also a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, but I still come back to this, to my experience there, because I lived not in Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro, but I lived in the state of Acre, in Rio Branco, the state of Acre, which is very far away from Sao Paulo. It's on the border of Peru and Bolivia, like the triangle. And they had completely different politics than neoliberal Sao Paulo. And what was for me very like super interesting, because remember, I come from former ex-Yugoslavia, and we had the trauma of the state falling apart with the war and all these atrocities that happened because of the new sort of partition of the territory. What I saw in Acre was the opposite, actually. The state gave half of its territories to people who cultivated the land in the way to make a sustainable territories, but also to avoid like illegally cutting of wood there in Amazonia. Right. And their policies are still very respected, and actually there are like case studies of how to do sustainable, if I can call it, development in Amazonia. Yeah. The territories were called extraction reserves. And if you look how they were organized, it's actually the same thing that we nearly achieved with the Of Soil and Water in London, or what my students did in Soweto. So we are all across the world in the same idea. It's actually what we need today is community organized and maintained territories. So basically what happens in these territories is actually new social agreement. Because you have to, if you just think about social agreement, you can think about this and that, but it all is very abstract. But if you really are working physically on something, then this becomes sort of a catalyst for reimagining your relationship with the state or with the community. Yeah.
I mean, I think that for us, that is super exciting. The idea that we can generate something that we can, try and live by and operate by in the future. I think that would be the, in some way, we always hope that's what the exhibitions and projects that we do, and how we learn and grow as an organization. But this feels like it's actually, that's embedded into what we're trying to do with the exhibition at the moment. So
yeah. Oh.
I mean,
It would be, I don't know, but maybe it would be good to have like partners within the city to develop certain ideas.
yeah,
Just to follow up on what I was saying before, that if you just talk, it becomes at some point very abstract and you hit the wall. But if you are really get your hands dirty, so to speak, then things develop. Yeah. New ideas take ground.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine because we're hopefully we would try and involve a range of projects and groups that, I mean, that there will probably be, you know, more than we would be looking to just to do, but you want to be choosing which ones we can focus on, which ones we can continue to champion or support, or, you know, and in a way see who else, like that idea that which community just carries it on if they combine with others, or but it feels, yeah, I'm sort of looking forward to how we start the exhibition and how we finish the exhibition, because I feel like we might have two different the sets of conditions. Yeah. Are there any other images that were in your in that set?
No. Maybe, I don't know if it's important, but there is this diagram that I gave you, the relational object. The last, no, not this one.
That one?
This one, yeah.
Yeah.
This is actually, I love the diagram because I don't know, it's super useful to explain the difference, the relationship between culture and art, because the main question is not art, but actually what is culture, because art depends on culture. And if art is not an object, but if it's a relational object, then also is a tool to change culture. So again, we are creating the circle. I always told my students that actually it's contemporary art or contemporary design or contemporary architecture needs to be embedded in contemporary culture. And of course, we are out of, let's say, living neoliberal social and economic agreements. So what are the new agreements that we want to achieve? And these kind of projects actually can help in the conversation. What was also interesting, what is interesting is when you look at the bottom, it says artist is a mediator. So again, artists can, I myself as an artist, I can be a studio artist as well when I make drawings. So I have completely different attitude and way of doing things than when I'm working on on-site projects with my students. And there I'm a mediator. But this is also super important because as an artist, you can give you can open up minds of people that you work with. It's actually you're developing or opening up the idea of the future city that they want to live in. I think that's important. So it's not only mediating between residents and the government, I don't know, and residents and this and that institutions, but it's also mediating the future of the city.
Yeah, and I suppose because you're doing it from a position of learning yourself as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
You always, from every project you learn a lot. That's the trick. That's the beauty.
Is it important in those situations to position yourself or to try and think of your mindset in relation to all the different elements, the kind of community, the state,
Oh no, it's very organic. All projects develop in super organic way. It's not that you would need to be a real expert to understand how things are done. communities or people whom you work with on site are super clever, and they know exactly what they need in these in their situations. Yeah,
There's
really
a question that sort of,
to do something together. It's the best.
there's a question that relates to it, saying what are your comments on big corporates and how local initiatives networks can hold their own against what the big corporations do within cities?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. Big corporations, I think we are talking about big capital. I think what we really need today is bottom-up idea of bottom-up planning, and actually institutions like governments, they also know they need more empowered residents because residents have been completely depoliticized in this during the neoliberal cloud. So the participation of residents in shaping their own city was very much alive and well in the 60s. And then we were, let's say, under neoliberalism, but now we need participation of residents again, actually to find a new way of doing things, which is not under the equation of, let's say, big capital and politics. The big capital and politics were working together perfectly for 40 years. They still do, but now they know, the government knows they cannot tackle the obstacles or the challenges that we face. And one is for sure the dissolution of social state and also the rise of climate change.
Yeah.
And you can also add COVID to the cocktail, no? So the governments actually know they need more empowered and politically conscious residents. So my recipe is always to work through the community-based projects, but not community-based projects that are somehow, I don't know how to say, that are just like a little thing, you know. They should really be well organized by residents themselves. And when I was living in, so you cannot impose, what I'm trying to say, sorry, is that you cannot impose a community-based project. It would fail. The community-based project needs to come from within the community. When I was living in Berlin, I know we had more than 100 community gardens, for instance. And you have to know that community gardens are not organized by the municipality. They're all bottom-up initiatives. And what do people do there? You know, is it really about, I don't know, sustainable living to living of the food that you produce there? No, it's actually community gardens are political schoolrooms. And I love to collaborate. I collaborated several times with Prinzessinnengarten in Berlin. They knew very well the balance between production of food, but also politics of the city. So they were, it was real political schoolroom there.
Great. Yeah, I think that's definitely on our list of people to be speaking to. I've already had a couple of conversations with allotment holders about I was actually talking about the dry toilet to begin with, but I'm wondering what else, you know, from their agenda, what happens, because I think that there was a lot of community gardens across Birmingham.
You know, so in short, just to finish this, in short, I would say that we are over the hill already. So we should not, you know, always look at the corporations as fait accompli, so to say, but actually what is already in the past. So we have to develop new ways of living together.
Yeah, and so you
can do it through community-based projects.
Yeah, you sound incredibly positive that we can push the government's agenda.
That's our choice.
And on that note, I want to just ask if there's any other questions anyone wants to ask. before we sign off for the day? There's been, I don't know if there's any more I might have missed from earlier. I'm sure I have. Anything else want to come in? I don't see anything. No. Oh, here's some. No, maybe that was all of them. We've gone through them. Great. Okay, I think we can wrap up there on that very positive note.
Yeah,
it's really brilliant. Thank you so much, Marjetica.
Thank you, Gavin, and thanks to everyone. No?
Yeah.
I really look forward to be a part of what we will create together.
And I'm going to look through all these other images and Yona Friedman's manuals that you just sent me, and we'll speak about it next week as well. So
we are creating this little library that we can use.
Yeah. I look forward to sharing it more. Great. All right then. Thank you everybody for coming along. And we're going to do a next studio visit in July. Off the top of my head, I think it might be the 16th of July, and we are visiting Alice Channer in her studio in East London to see how production processes are developing with Alice. So thank you again, Marjetica, and look forward to seeing you all soon. All right, bye.